Great to be with you. So, you saw this topic for today, full vulnerability of the senses. Now, like all of our topics, we could really take a good year to break open the topic. And this one is the same as all of the rest. And certainly, even in naming the topic, full vulnerability of the senses, there are many different directions we could go just with that. So I'm not intending to give something that's a larger overview here, but rather just one point of entry, just one point for our inspiration today. So let me read the two quotes that I had in the newsletter for you. The first one, Jesus lamented, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often I have desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. And then we have the second quote from same author, Luke, different chapter 19. But another look at Jerusalem. As Jesus came near Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it, saying, if you, even you, had only recognized on this day the things that make for peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. What I want to point to in these two passages, and once again remembering we could really go so many directions, and I was a bit torn. I want to point to the spontaneous experience we have of Jesus in these passages, and both of them are him expressing emotions that are of a certain amount of anguish or distress or sadness or discomfort. Now, with Luke 13, what we have in this passage that comes before is he's speaking to those around him, and he is talking about that the gateway to heaven, to self-realization, that it's narrow, and that we must choose this narrow path if we are to really enter into the self-realization that we are called to. And that could be confusing when we're talking about the senses, right? Because the topic of today is full vulnerability of the senses. But if it's the narrow route, does that mean then, as sometimes is misinterpreted, that we're meant to so control our senses that we have the guise of mastery, almost like a stoic, right? A stoic takes a certain stance and position that's of a certain holy indifference or dispassion. But I think we have evidence that Jesus, right after that, has this huge explosion of emotion that he longed for those he was loving to realize what the path of peace was. And he didn't hold himself back. After he talks about the narrow door, he has Pharisees warning him that Herod's out to kill him, but he very insightfully tells them to go and give him a message so that he can say he's doing all of these things for a specific reason. He says right before this phrase, today, tomorrow, and the next day, I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. And then he goes into this anguish of this longing So what comes about from these senses is that first, he has a certain self-mastery. He realizes that he's bringing a message of love. And second, that he is a prophet. So he doesn't hide what he is, but he steps into it. And that stepping into it vulnerably allows him to have the deep emotion of the longing he has for others to experience peace and for union with others. And then with 19, so he's once again lamenting around Jerusalem. This phrase that he brings up in chapter 19 comes right after what's considered Palm Sunday. So in Palm Sunday, what happens is Jesus comes with his followers and friends and disciples, and he's going to come into Jerusalem, and he gives them the instruction to go and get a colt that he's going to ride into town. And spontaneously, because the presence of God is so strong, spontaneously, there is an eruption in the culture of praise. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory on the highest heaven and on earth. And we have the naysayers, the Pharisees, that are saying, stop, don't speak that way, that's blasphemous. And then he recognizes and laments and says, if only you knew the path of peace. So once again, we have this witness of Jesus stepping into his own. He's full of self-mastery and abandon. And he is in his willingness to be vulnerable to who and what he is in life. He has the freedom of expression to be celebrated, to state his own truth, to lament with anguish and longing when he sees that the peace that he longs to be a teacher of and an instrument of isn't understood, or the people around him, some have capacity and others do not. So we have here these two examples of Jesus being fully sense-oriented. And that can rock our spiritual world a little bit. If you come from any lineage or tradition or any particular practice, everything from Buddhism to Catholicism to all the different lineages and traditions that are geared towards helping us in liberation, you will find that there is inherently a certain level of teaching that's misappropriated that can have us hesitant about being fully open to the movement of our senses. And yet we discover through the mystics and in these examples of Jesus that it's actually through the senses themselves that we awaken into our call and our destiny, that through the senses themselves. So it brings us to you and me. In what way are we open to the experience of truth through our senses and the expression of truth through our senses? Part of how we become innocent and effective in this is to allow the senses to be the very portal through which we taste God. And that means all across the board, not just when we feel bliss because we have a harmonious moment in meditation or at a sunset or reading a certain passage or in the company of someone we love. It includes that as well. And I could have taken that just as easily. But it also includes what happens in this life that we might call painful. And to draw upon that, I'm going to go back into my trusted Radiant Sutras that I love so much by my colleague Lauren Roche. And I'm going to read you Sutra number 93. Sting of a wasp, rip of a nail, a razor's slice, the needle's plunge, a piercing word, a stab of betrayal, the boundary crossed, a trust broken. In this lacerating moment, pain is all you know. Life is tattooing scripture into your flesh, scribing incandescence in your nerves. Right here, in this single searing point of intolerable concentration, wound becomes portal. Wound becomes portal. Brokenness surrenders to crystalline brilliance of being. So that last phrase, crystalline brilliance of being, sounds rather lofty, doesn't it? I mean, it sounds very, very etheric. And yet everything that is being spoken to here in this ancient Tibetan text is gritty. It is the uncomfortable moments of life, whether it's as inconsequential as the sting of a wasp, or whether it is potentially deeply traumatic, a stab of betrayal. All of these have an instant of pain to them. And that moment itself, that exists in the moment it happens, and it exists just as alive if you're still carrying it. So if it's still within the cell, if the pain body is still carrying it, it is as alive now in as much as the pain is alive. But what we have an opportunity to in that moment is to frame it this way, which I just think is absolutely delightful to say. Life is tattooing scripture into your flesh, scribing incandescence in your nerves. Now, when we come to that framework, what happens? The pain becomes a portal, right? And our response to the pain, which is more consequential, our response to the pain becomes a portal as well. It becomes free of resistance, free of analysis, free of repression, free of all of that that separates us from the moment. This is what we're talking about with full vulnerability of the senses. And Jesus was so given in those statements. He was so just what he was, that it could all flow through him. The moments of pain through the skepticism, the criticism, the apathy, the resistance, the ignorance, all of that could touch in with him, and the wound could become portal. I love the phrasing that Lauren gives to the text right here in this single searing point. It's like a point, right? It's like a little stab of intolerable concentration. And the concentration could be the quickening of you in your focus, but it is in this text, it's that point, because the pain point is the intolerable concentration. It's concentrated right there. It may radiate out from there, but it's concentrated there. So when it comes to be fully vulnerable, fully open with your senses, do you want that level of freedom? On a deep sense, on a soul sense, I think we all desire it. But it's a nice personal inquiry with little pricks or big stabs that you carry within your being. How vulnerable are you? Are you open to come to the place where you utter quite easily, wound becomes portal, wound becomes portal. So it's in through the point that the portal is open to the experience of what? The crystalline brilliance of your own being. So our meditation practice today is going to be a Sikh mantra for healing. And so this is the opportunity as we open for you to touch in on where do you carry a point of concentration where there is a pain. It could be physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, it could be a mix of all of them. It could be something that just happened. It could be a memory from when you were 2 years old. It could be something carried from the collective, from past lives or other dimensions. It doesn't really matter. But it does matter that you bring it into the meditation. So what we're going to do is we're going to open to this itness and settling in so that you become very aware with the pain point, not analyzing it, but with your senses, coming to it with the senses. Senses, what is that? Feeling it, tasting it, touching it, viewing it without judgment, smelling it if smell comes about. The visualization could be something like density or darkness. Whatever arises for you, that's resting in with your senses. And then after we settle in each individually on some pain point that exists in our being, then we're going to open up to the mantra. So let me tell you that it's very easy. It's just 8 syllables, and you will be able to tone it with me. I'm going to tone it the same way over and over again. It's Ra, Ma, Da, Sa. Sa, Se, So, Hung. So go ahead with yourself on mute. See if you can say that with me a couple times. Ra, Ma, Da, Sa. Sa, Se, So, Hung. Let's say it again. Ra, Ma, Da, Sa. Sa, Se, So, Hung. And I'll give you the translation. Ra, sun. Ma, moon. Da, earth. Sa, impersonal infinity. Sa, se, totality of infinity. So, personal sense of merger and identity. Hung, the infinite, vibrating, and real. This mantra is chanted for full breadth of healing through all of the dimensions. Therefore, it's invoking and opening up all of the dimensions as well. We're going to do 2 things once we start the mantra. The first is you're going to let your elbows be kind of hugged into your side, and you're going to hold at kind of a 90-degree angle your arms out. Let me make sure you can see me. And your palms, you don't have to be rigid, but your palms are going to be facing upwards, about a 45-degree angle. So center point, about a 45-degree angle. You're going to hold it there through the mantra sounding. And on the syllable hung, you're going to pull the navel in. So the navel is your belly button area. So we're going to draw in a breath. We're going to tone the 8 syllables. And on the very 8th, the hung, you're going to pull the belly button in, and you'll feel that hung kind of calibrate and tighten in. Then we'll bring in a breath, tone the mantra on hung, pull the navel in, bring in a breath, tone the mantra, hung, pull the navel in. All right, and we'll repeat that mantra. And just know that any way you tone it is just fine. I'm going to just do a very simple tone, but any way you tone it is good. If you can, do tone it, because it helps it vibrate through your cells and helps it accomplish the healing that we're opening to, that each one of us will bring individually. Okay, so I invite you to close your eyes. And we know that where 2 or 3 are gathered in the name of the divine, in the name of God, in the Christ presence, that presence is alive with greater potency in our midst. And in the safety of this knowing, I invite you to take a moment or two in silence and bring to your awareness one pain that exists within you. See if as you bring that pain into your awareness, into your direct focus, see if you can notice what's happening in your body and in your senses and in your mind. And get real. This is a place where scripture is being inscribed in your very flesh. In your very flesh. This is holy ground. And honing your focus here on this holy ground that is part of you. Bring the elbows very lightly, not pressing to the side. Let the arms be at 90 degrees, the forearms and the palms turned upward. A 90-degree angle from the shoulder, but 45 from the center. And let the palms face upward. And make sure you're feeling comfortable, that nothing's strained. Invite in a breath and release. Invite in a breath and release. Invite in a breath. And we begin. Ramadasa sa se so hung. Pulling the navel in, inviting in a breath. Ramadasa sa se so hung. Invite in a breath. Ramadasa sa se so hung. Invite in a breath. Ramadasa sa se so hung. Pulling the navel in. Invite in a breath. Ramadasa sa se so hung. We continue without prompts. Ramadasa sa se so hung. Ramadasa sa se so hung. Ramadasa sa se sohang. 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 One more round. Ramadasa sa se sohang. And as we bring the mantra to a close, sit once again with the sensations of the wound being portal, the wound being portal. And with that, bring the palms together in front of the chest and open the eyes with namaste. Namaste. Blessings, my friends. See you soon.